Ivan Petrovich Pavlov was a pharmacologist and psychologist. For most of his life, Pavlov avoided mentalistic terms. Pavlov formally banned all psychological terminology from his laboratory, threatening to fire anyone who discussed findings in subjective terms. He spent his life studying conditioned reflexes. Pavlov established a research center of international reputation just outside Leningrad in the 1930s. Pavlov was working on neural and glandular basis of digestion. In connection with this research, Pavlov discovered the essential principle of associative conditioning for which he is remembered today. Pavlov had developed a device that he implanted in the neck of his dog subjected which collects saliva as a measure of digestive pressure under investigation. During his careful experimentation, Pavlov noted that the subjective reliable salivated in anticipation of receiving food, which was signaled by the approach of an experimenter or the presentation of a food dish. This observation led to the development of conditioning reflexology. He found that he could take a neural stimulus, such as mm, metronome beat, a tune, or a light, and after successively pairing it with a primary reward, such as food, a motivated that is hungry. Dog will respond with salivation to the neural stimulus presented without the food. He termed the natural stimulus that occurred the eliciting properties of the primary reward, the conditional stimulus. Extinction. Pavlov defined extinction as the repeated presentation of the conditioned stimulus in the absence of primary reward. Pavlov specified four experimental events in the acquisition and extinction process. Number one, unconditioned stimulus or US. An environmental event such as food, which can elicit an organismic reflex. Number two, conditioned stimulus or CS. An environmental event such as tone that is natural with respect to the response prior to pairing with us. Number three, unconditional response or UR. The natural reflex such as salivation. Number four, conditional response or CS. The cure reflex such as salivation elicited by the CS after association with the US. Interval. Within this simple design, there was room for the systematic variation of many factors. The interval between the conditioned and unconditioned stimuli was varied, and it was found that the strongest and quickest conditioned response occurred when the interval was very short. If the conditioned stimulus followed the unconditioned stimulus, however, even by a very short interval, no conditioned reflex at all could be produced. Generalization. In one series of experiments, Pavlov investigated the effect of the test stimulus that was somewhat different from the original conditioned stimulus. He discovered that if an animal were tested with a stimulus that was similar to the conditioned stimulus, say a tone of a slightly higher or lower frequency than that which had been paired with food during the conditioning response occurred, but it was weaker than it would have been in response to the original conditioned stimulus. The more dissimilar the test stimulus was, the weaker the response. This phenomenon is known as generalization. Differentiation. Repeated generalization tests lead to further development. For example, a dog was repeatedly fed following the sounding of a certain musical tone. On the first generalization trial, tune one half and octave lower was sounded, and a substantial salary responses occurred. Thereafter, the two tones were randomly sounded on different trials, with the original tone was being reinforced by the immediate presentation of food, and the lower tone never being reinforced. Gradually, the generalized response to the lower tones decreased until it finally disappeared altogether. This phenomenon is known as differentiation. The animal learned not only to respond positively to one stimulus, but also to inhibit the generalization of the response to a similar stimulus. Experimental neurosis. In some of the experiments with differentiation, Pavlov gradually raised the pitch of the low tones, making them more and more similar to the high ones. At a certain point, the difference becomes so small that the dog was no longer able to distinguish between them. In some cases, the dog broke down and started to bark and bite, apparently exposed to conflicting stimuli of excitation and inhibition. This state was called by Pavlov experimental neurosis. Pavlov reported the whole behavior of the animal underwent an abrupt change. On being taken into the experimental room, the dog now barked violently. In short, it presented all the symptoms of a condition of acute neurosis. Some animals seem to succumb easily to stress, while others show more resistance. Moreover, the different type of disorder developed under stress are related to the already existing differences in the behavior of animals. Some dogs easily form positive reflexes, but it is difficult to produce in them inhibitory reflexes. Dogs which easily form inhibitory reflexes were characterized by acute, timid, and submissive behavior.